Good evening. Welcome to Real World, Real Talk. I am your host, DZ Cofield. You're listening to KTSU 90.9 FM here on the campus of Texas Southern University. And we are excited to have you with us today on what promises to be a great show. Now, before we get started, let me just give you a couple of ground rules and take care of a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, you can reach me on Facebook at DZ Cofield. You can also reach me on Instagram, and we have pictures of our guests already posted on Instagram. You can also follow me on Twitter if you have suggestions for a show. If you'd like to comment, maybe send in some questions, and we can get to them. We certainly want to do that. Let me also let you know, our listening audience, that tonight's show is a show of mature content. We're going to be very explicit about this subject because I believe tonight's show is intended to save somebody's life. If you know a man over the age of 40, if you are a man over the age of 40, if you have friends over the age of 40, that's any man, but in particular, African American men, I want you to call them and tell them to tune in to Real World, Real Talk. If you're listening to 90.9 FM, you are exactly where you need to be. If they're not in the Houston metropolitan area, call them, tell them to get online at ktsufm.org, click the Listen Now button, and they'll be able to listen to a live feed of this show. Tonight, we're going to talk about prostate cancer, the silent killer. For many men, when we hear the phrase prostate cancer, we're fearful, we're afraid of the exam. As a matter of fact, I think a large number of men are more afraid of the exam or what they believe will be the exam than they are about contracting prostate cancer. I want to help you today to put your mind at ease. I cannot tell you, as we've been preparing for this show and we've been talking about it, how many men have said to me, you know what, I haven't had my screening, I need to get screened, I've never been screened. And when we talk about prostate cancer, one of the things that I want you to understand is it saves lives. If you don't get screened, you run the risk of losing your life. It's just that simple. Prostate cancer is the most commonly diagnosed and the second leading cause of male cancer death. What you may not know is that African American men have a 1 in 3 chance of being diagnosed as opposed to normal or other men who have a 1 in 6 chance. So it is more prevalent in our community. It is more aggressive in our community. And brothers, we have to take a proactive stance. There are a number of advances in medicine regarding how to be tested, how to be treated. We'll talk later on with some producers who are producing a documentary called The Silent Killer. We'll also talk to somebody who is part of that documentary. We've got a great doctor in the studio with us to explain to us in layman's terms what prostate cancer is all about. You don't want to miss it. So again, let me say to you, if you're just joining us, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk on KTSU 90.9 FM. Tonight's subject has mature content. So if you have young children around or people who are sensitive, I would suggest that you don't listen to this show because, as the title states, Real World, Real Talk, we're going to talk real about prostate cancer. Our first guest is Dr. Franklin Hall. Dr. Hall and I have known each other for many years. He has a BS in nuclear engineering from Texas A&M University. He has an MD from the University of Texas Medical School. He served 14 years as a research and quality assurance doctor at MD Anderson Center, specializing in clinical research studies in prostate cancer, breast cancer, and cervical cancer. He also is a gifted preacher and teacher. He's been in the preaching ministry for 22 years and is the founding pastor of the Heritage Community Church in Pearland, Texas. I wanted somebody who has full knowledge, not just of prostate cancer, but of the latest treatments that are going on out there. And we're happy to have you here with us, Dr. Hall. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Pastor Cofield.
You know, when we talk about prostate cancer, a lot of times people are suffering in silence. But as we've seen from men like Warren Buffett all the way to that legendary R&B singer Charlie Wilson, prostate cancer is rearing its ugly head in men across socioeconomic stratus, across racial lines, but it's especially attacking African American men. Talk to us about where we are regarding prostate cancer in our country?
The first thing that we all need to understand is that no one is exempt when it comes to this silent killer. The thing that's so alarming about it is that it is more prevalent amongst African American men. The rates are so much greater than that of averages compared to all nationalities. And one of the problems within the African American community, especially among African American men, is that we are not as easily encouraged to go to the doctor just for an annual checkup. So it's very possible that we walk. Most of us may walk today actually having prostate cancer, but we're not aware of the fact that we have prostate cancer. And you can't find it by luck, you don't find it by chance, but one of the best measures for all black men to do in this day and age is to get yourself screened, to get yourself checked, especially as Dr. Cofield mentioned, if you are within your 40s at this point, on the national average, typically for any male, you're encouraged once you hit age 50 to begin having your annual screenings for prostate cancer, but for African American men, it is currently age 45. And as recently as 3 years ago, that age was, there was a discussion on that age being revised to 43 at this point amongst just African American men alone. So for all of the brothers that are out there that are right upon the eve of 45, I would encourage you, don't even wait until you turn 45. I'm 44, and I'm planning on going ahead and getting my screening done because you just can't really take a chance at this point of not finding out, not knowing. And there shouldn't be any fear within our men just as well as far as for not wanting to know at this point.
My friend Rudy Rasmus, pastor at the St. John Church, downtown Houston, has a slogan that I'm adopting: it's better to know.
Yes.
And a lot of people are walking around in silence. But when you talk about African American men being diagnosed with prostate cancer at twice the rate of other nationalities and dying at almost twice the rate of other nationalities, it's really a pandemic. And, you know, I think a lot of times when we hear reports on the news regarding prostate screening and being over-screened and you don't need to do it, we might take that to mean us. But as African American men, man, we've got to take responsibility, be proactive, and get tested.
No doubt about it at all. Your life should mean something of value if it means no value to anyone else. And I feel that an aware individual will take the next proactive stance to see to it that by all means that they allow themselves to be on top of the line from a health standpoint. There is a terminology that is used in the automotive industry that is known as preventative maintenance. And the reason that you have preventative maintenance on your vehicle is primarily for the reason that you won't have to encounter problems later on down the road unexpectedly. Well, if it's important enough for that to be tagged onto your vehicle, why not you? When you have people that depend on you, when you have a spouse, when you have children, when you have family, when you have friends who depend on you, even if you're your own dependent, you should value your life enough to make it up in your mind that I'm going to do this. There's nothing about losing any macho image behind it. This is about you taking care of you. Within the Black church, we teach about stewardship. Well, one of the things that we can touch upon on that is with regards to the handling of the life that God has given you. It's not just the money, it's not just material things, but it's what God has given you that is the most precious thing that you could ever receive. Your life. And therefore, once again, it cannot be urged and it cannot be stressed enough how important it is for African American men to take this stand and make health, your personal health, a priority in your life at this point.
You know, one of the things we attempted to do, we had the directors and producers of the Silent Killer documentary at the church today, and they'll be on a little bit later on. But one of the things that we tried to do in terms of raising awareness was to have a truck come out and do prostate screening. And we could not find a truck anywhere in the medical center, city medical services, health services, or anywhere. And what was interesting was one of the representatives of a very prominent cancer treatment center here in Houston said to me, if it was breast cancer, you would have had no problem. Said, but we just don't put the funds into prostate cancer. You as a medical doctor, respond to that, please.
In this case, I don't believe that there should be any excuse that is accepted at this point. I believe that if it became an issue to us as well as a priority to us, and we make up a significant portion of the face of this city, there is not an institution, a medical institution within this city that should deny us the access that we need. Everybody can't come to the doctor's office. So there are times when, on occasions where it's fit and it's meeting for the doctor's office to come to our communities, to come and meet us right at the point where we hurt. And budget shouldn't have to be a limitation on that by any means. And we shouldn't accept that by any standards. If we can stand up and we can rally over injustice within our communities, why can't we stand up and rally over us being treated the way that we should be, especially in a city where we're well represented just as well?
I think you raise an excellent point. I mean, we talk about social injustice, and in a very real sense, we're really talking about medical injustice, especially when it affects us in such an adverse way. For those of you just joining us today, you're listening to KTSU 90.9 FM, and you're in tune with Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, DZ Cofield. We're talking about prostate cancer, and again, let me remind our listeners, we're dealing with a mature subject matter, and so if you have young children who are listening, I want to suggest that you might want to send them in the other room. If you have a little squeamishness about you or you're very sensitive, then I would suggest that you might change your radio dial, because we're going to talk about some very real issues that are facing our community. When you talk about prostate cancer is diagnosed in one of 4 stages. Talk a little bit about those stages. When I go get checked, I get my PSA taken, I get that digital rectal exam, whatever the case may be, and we'll talk a little bit about the fear of men getting that exam along with just going to the doctor. But if I'm diagnosed, what am I looking at when they tell me I'm at stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4?
Depending upon the stage that you're diagnosed at, 1 being on the lower end of that scale, it's actually indication that you're in the initial stages of cancer development, cancer growth within the prostate itself. And in most instances, stage 1 diagnosis can be thoroughly treated and are highly successful in treatment to where there is very little to no reoccurrence. Just as well, as a matter of fact, the actual success rate is up in the lower to mid 90 percentile region within itself. Now, on the opposite end of that spectrum, stage 4, in most instances, you are looking and facing a great hill and a great climb that's ahead of you. Even doctors are a bit less optimistic and see this as too much, in some cases, too much of a challenge to overcome, because possibly too much time has passed. Possibly the cancer has spread it from just one localized region to multiple regions now within the system, and so your outlook and your chances of survival decline as each stage increases at this point. But here's the key to it all. The key to the whole element, and I think that knowledge is power for the benefit of us in many different ways. The most powerful tool that we have as African American males to combat prostate cancer is simply through early screening. The earlier that this is detected, the easier it is to beat it. And the one thing about it is that we have to learn how to capitalize on that. Doctors are not necessarily miracle workers. I know that there are many who fall upon spiritual beliefs, faith, and whatnot, but doctors themselves are limited in how much they can actually administer, how much they can actually render in aid unto you to actually treat your disease. And some doctors, in some instances, will write you off, and this is just an honest truth. We're on Real World, Real Talk, but some doctors will write you off before even thinking about beginning to administer, because sometimes finances come into the picture. And so if it's not worth the risk, if it's not worth the investment to treat you from a financial standpoint, then basically you're pretty much given a condolence speech and tell them sorry, but there's nothing else we can do for you, and you're sent on out the door at that point. No one should have to be treated that way. I'll tell anybody, because I refuse to be treated this way, especially if I'm a patient. You should not allow yourself to be viewed by your doctor as just another number that's passing through the door, but for them to respect you as a human being, as a person. All doctors have an oath that we must take, and that is that there's no biasness upon the patients that we treat. If one of your family members were to walk in, then you'd want to treat any other patient the same way, with the same approach, with the same enthusiasm as you would if it were one of your own family members. So for us, we can do our part alone, and that is get the early screening, and if this is a disease that is caught early on, then you have a reason to be optimistic. You have a reason to be encouraged that you will not have a reoccurrence and basically be able to proceed on with a healthy life.
Again, if you're just joining us, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk on KTSU 90.9 FM, member-supported public radio here on the campus of Texas Southern University. Also want to thank those of you who are tuning in via the World Wide Web on ktsufm.org. We're talking about prostate cancer. Again, if you know a man who is 40 or above of African descent, if you love a man who is 40 or above, I want you to give them a call and have them tune in. You need to hear this information because I know somebody's life can be saved if you act on this information. Dr. Hall, I was talking to several brothers this week, and the issue of getting tested came up regarding how you're tested. And I know early on the DRE was the primary way that you were tested, the digital rectal exam. And a lot of men were like, man, I'm not going through that. You know, I ain't having nobody stick no finger up my behind and that kind of thing. And a lot of men would not get tested because of that. Mm-hmm. A lot of men could not get tested because of a lack of health insurance and mm-hmm. coverage. Talk a little bit about the advances in terms of testing and the different kinds of tests that now are being administered to determine whether or not your PSA is high, whether or not you're at risk. Talk a little bit about that for us.
Well, I think that the brothers can breathe a sigh of relief once I tell you that have now, or at least I should say that methods have now been established for more minimally invasive types of scans in particular. Now, we got to come and understand one particular item and aspect, and this deals a little bit with physiology and anatomy, and it's knowing exactly and understanding where the prostate is located. You can only have access to it via one particular means. There is no real alternative of getting around what is the obvious. Rectal scans and whatnot are done, and searches are done for a particular reason because it is the immediate area where the prostate gland itself is located. But in the medical field, advances have been made, as I've already said, for it to be less painful as well as less invasive. But you cannot overcome that particular obvious state. What was the second part of your question, Dr. Cofield, on that?
Well, the second part was what kind of treatments are out there? What kind of options are out there in terms of screening?
We have a variety of treatments that are available. As I was discussing with some of our in-house guests earlier, having the options is a benefit. We have, of course, what most people are accustomed to, radiotherapy, whereby they are treated with photons for their prostate cancer. But we also have the use of what is also proton therapy, which is the newest cutting-edge form of treatment for prostate cancer. It's actually being utilized here for the last 3 years here in Houston at the Proton Center that MD Anderson now has established within our city, which is one of just a handful that are established worldwide at this point. Just as well, if laying down on a table is not your cup of tea and getting shot up with some radiation then from a beam because you may feel symptoms of claustrophobia and whatnot, then also there is a technical term known as brachytherapy which is an area that I have my specialty with, whereby radioactive seeds are injected directly into the prostate gland via needles. And for the interest of those brothers who are a little bit weak in the mind, we'll let you know ahead of time in getting a needle injected within you that you will be heavily sedated. So you don't have to worry about being awake. You will not feel anything as a result of this, but it's highly effective, very successful. And as I said once before, it turns heads in this particular case because it brings about real results that are very effective.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk on the campus of Texas Southern University on KTSU 90.9 FM. We're going to take a pause for the cause. We'll be back in just a moment to talk to the directors and producers of the documentary, The Silent Killer. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned.
A proud business member of The Choice is Gulf Coast Community Service Association's Head Start and Early Head Start Centers, now accepting children's applications for the 2013-2014 school year. Services provided at no cost are for families looking to start their infant and toddler children in an early childhood education program. Applications are being accepted at the TSU Head Start location or any of GCCSA's 20 Houston locations. Children with learning and physical disabilities are welcomed. For more information, the website is gccsa.org or by phone at 713-393-4777.
Welcome back to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, DZ Cofield, here on Texas Southern University's radio station, KTSU 90.9 FM, member-supported public radio. For those of you who are just tuning in, we're doing a show on a subject that will literally save lives. If you act on this information, brothers in particular, and women who love black men, you will save somebody's life. We're talking about prostate cancer. Now, again, for those of you who are listening, this is a mature subject content show. And so I want to encourage you, if you're a little squeamish or you're a little sensitive, this might not be the show for you because as the name of our show suggests, we're going to have real talk around this very, very real issue. The silent killer. Many people, when they hear that phrase, they don't attribute it to prostate cancer, but that's what prostate cancer is in the African American community. It is a silent killer. And we're really, really encouraged today to have the directors and producers of this documentary, Landy Maduro and Chris Edwards, with us in studio. Thank you all for coming and sharing with us. We've been hanging out for the last couple of days, and we really, really appreciate the work that you're doing to bring this disease to light in our community. Thank you for coming and sharing with us.
Thank you for having us.
Talk a little bit about how this documentary came about. I mean, you know, when I started looking at the numbers and started seeing what was going on, I get my prostate checked. I go to the doctor a couple of times a year, different doctors. You know, the older you get, the more doctors you go to. And whenever I have blood drawn, I try to get tested for everything, whether I think I'm at risk or not. I want to know because, as I stated at the outset, it's better to know. And so I want to get tested for everything. I did not realize how many men are not getting checked and how many men are being affected by this disease. How did you all get involved in this work?
I'll let you start, Chris, since you brought it to me.
Well, a few years ago, another doctor and I had gotten together to put together a documentary, and for some reason, you know, that didn't really particularly happen and the relationship got dissolved. However, I wanted to continue on with the documentary because one of the things that affected me the most was when my father was diagnosed with prostate cancer at an early age, and he's currently a survivor. Secondly, my brother got diagnosed with prostate cancer, so I felt the need that it was strongly important for me to get the word out. And then through divine intervention, God hooked me up with a great director, and I pitched the documentary to her. And she said, "Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's see what we can do to make this happen." And from there, we, you know,
blossomed. And it really was amazing because I mean, as a woman, obviously, I don't have an issue with prostate cancer, nor at the time was anyone in my family diagnosed. But when Chris brought it to me, he was so passionate about it. I thought, you know what, I really want to help spread the word, because it really made me sad that so many Black men were dying from prostate cancer when they didn't have to, that it's such a treatable disease when it's detected early, that it's like the doctor said, 90% rate of curing it, and yet so many men just aren't doing it out of fear. And that really bothered me. And so we started working on the documentary, and then 6 months into working on it, my father was diagnosed.
Wow.
So I was very happy that I had a lot of knowledge from doing all this research, from working on the film, that I was able to probably, I say educate my dad, he says harass him, but I was able to really be supportive to him through the process.
Now, one of the things that came to light out of looking at the trailers that you all have put online, and for those of you who are interested, you can go to thesilentkillerdoc.com, thesilentkillerdoc.com. They have a number of clips available to be viewed on YouTube. One of the things that I learned in this process was that while there are some symptoms as you get in the higher stages of prostate cancer, many men walk around with the disease within them growing with no symptoms at all. And I think that's one of the most shocking things. I mean, with breast cancer, of course you can have the gene and you can be more susceptible, but women have the opportunity. They can do a self-exam, they can get a mammogram, etc. But there is no self-exam that you can give yourself as a man, and you can have the disease and have absolutely no symptoms at all.
Right.
That's right. And that's why, we're really trying to start a movement with this film, because so many men aren't getting tested because, like you said, there's no symptoms. And when they do start having symptoms, by that time, they could have advanced stage cancer. And we just felt like it just doesn't make any sense. If all you have to do is get screened, then how can we spread the word? And we wanted to do it on a very personal level, not just throw a whole lot of facts into a film and say, watch this. So we followed 3 men at 3 different stages of prostate cancer through a gentleman named Rico Ross is our host. And we basically took the audience on his journey to learn more about prostate cancer and to meet these men and to see how they found out they had it and what it's like to go through the treatment process. And just really, our goal, like I said, is just to really spread the word.
Rico crosses the country asking the question, why are Black men dying in silence? And you have these 3 men that you're following who have been diagnosed at various stages.
Correct.
There's so many moving moments in the documentary. One of the men who's part of your documentary is here today and is going to share his story, very, very powerful story. And I know his love for life, and I know his love for people is so great. What struck me was, and there was a particular lady, and I think you all can probably identify who it is, who's married to a gentleman, and she was asked the question, what would you say to men who refuse to get tested or won't get tested? And she said, I would tell them to stop being so selfish.
Right.
And I was like, wow, and she's sitting there next to her husband who has been tested, but she talks about the selfishness of men, their unwillingness to think about more than just themselves. Because there's so many things that are tied to prostate cancer, a lot of fear, a lot of unknowns, including sexual activity, impotence, erectile dysfunction. I mean, just all of those things, am I going to lose my machismo, my desire for women, whatever the case may be. And a lot of men would rather ignore it than face it head on and do something about it. Tell me about some of the moving moments and the people that you've talked to that has really resonated with you as you've gone through this process.
Well, that moment was very moving because that's my father and my stepmother, and it was like all tears after she said that. He kept trying to get me crying behind this scene. But it was very moving. One thing I have to commend my dad is he was so open with us, and he shared with us his diagnosis right off the spot. And as we were traveling, we were learning that a lot of men they had prostate cancer, didn't even tell their wives or family. They found out after they passed away or when they were so sick, they were incapacitated. And the fact that my father was very open and shared with us what he was going through every step. Today I'm having my biopsy. You guys, today I'm doing this, today I'm doing that. Like, I have to commend him, and we want more men to be open like that, because like she said, it is very selfish. You're taking your family through this journey with you.
Yeah.
And whether you think it or not, I don't care how macho you are, your family, people that love you, are going to be affected by whatever happens to you. And that's the point we're trying to get across too, that stepping up to the plate and being a man means getting screened, not necessarily, pretending like everything's okay.
I'll tell you the truth, and you guys, we've been hanging out for the last couple of days, and I think one of the things that has been moving to me is there has not been one person that we've talked to, including walking into the studio today, that has not said, oh yeah, you know what, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, or a close family member was diagnosed with prostate cancer, a father, a brother, whatever the case may be, and we're suffering in silence because nobody's really talking about this in our community like it needs to be talked about. Chris, when you heard that your dad was diagnosed, and you said now he's doing well, and we thank God for that, tell me about the response of your family, and then your brother contracted the disease as well, which puts you at a higher risk because you have that family history. What was the response of your family to that?
One of the things, for me, my dad got diagnosed almost 20 years ago, and he had his prostate cancer. He had his prostate removed. So I was still, I was young. I was still, it really didn't affect me because of my age at the time. But one of the things that my father said when I interviewed him, I actually, shot him. He lives in Gary. Traveled up to Gary to interview him. He said that one of the things that was so important to him was when our family bonded together to support him. At the time, because I was in school, he went up to one of the major institutions up in Wisconsin to get treated. And he said, my mom was there, my sister was there for him. So family is really key to survival in this case. And just for me, recently I had my prostate exam, and the doctor wants me to go every 6 months. And so I was like, oh man, that's, but it's so important for me, even, being, I guess, with my father and my brother being diagnosed, for me to go and make sure that I stay healthy and I'm going to say that, and eat correct. Because sometimes that's a struggle for us men.
Yeah, especially when you go to the Breakfast Club. For breakfast, yeah, it's a little tough here,
Right, so, but it's very important for us to eat right and to get tested. And in my case, get tested, even though I don't want to, but get tested every 6 months.
And can I just say, the other thing that was really fascinating as we've been traveling, working on this documentary, is a lot of these men who were diagnosed had a strong history of prostate cancer in their families and still were not getting screened. And, one of the gentlemen that we followed, he had stage 4 prostate cancer. His father and both brothers had prostate cancer, and he still did not get screened until it was too late. And that we need to stop. That we're just really trying to stop. Get men screened sooner and get them tested sooner. That's our goal.
Dr. Hall, talk a little bit about that increased risk, because I think Landy raises an important issue that if you have a father, a brother who has contracted this disease, the likelihood of you contracting this disease rises exponentially compared to other people who are just walking around in society.
Very true. It's a reality, and just because you don't feel that an individual within the family wouldn't feel as if they'd have the chances of contracting the disease, you have to be realistic about this. If Daddy had it, if great grandpa had it, chances are it's going to work its way down to me. I'm on the radar. And therefore you have to take a different type of mentality, and instead of seeing that there's no way that it can possibly happen to me, you have to consider yourself as, what risk am I really at? And the only way that you will know as an individual is to basically get yourself tested. We're going to keep coming back to this point over and over and over again. Whether you had a male factor in your family who did contract prostate cancer or not, still it should be of a great priority for you as an African American male to get yourself screened, regardless.
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. There was a young lady as part of your trailer package that talks about her father who lived a what most of us would consider an exemplary lifestyle. Vegetarian, healthy living, ate organic food, and he still contracted the disease and ended up dying from it. And Dr. Hall mentioned earlier that this disease really is no respecter of persons. Talk a little bit about not just the three men that you've talked to, but you've talked to other men and you've heard other stories. And it seems to just cross the gambit, regardless of socioeconomic status, educational achievements. I mean, it just doesn't matter. Any man of African descent is going to be more susceptible to this disease than others. And is that what you were finding out there?
Yes, definitely. It really doesn't matter. I mean, when we've been talking to doctors, we've interviewed countless doctors, and unfortunately, African American men are at higher risk. They think it could have to do with diet, exercise, the lack of exercise, rather. But then again, the gentleman you're referring to, Horace, he was a vegan, but he had a very high rate of prostate cancer. Two of his brothers and his father both have prostate cancer. So it is no respective person, and we really want to educate people. We did street interviews in LA on a popular boulevard called Melrose, and it was very fascinating to find out some people didn't even know what the prostate was or where it is in their body and what its function is. And so that alone told us that we need to make sure that we're educating people.
One of the men in the documentary is a friend, somebody that I've known and loved, he and his family for many years. He used to be on staff at our church, and when I found out that he was ill, of course I was taken aback. He's younger than I am, but then when I found out the seriousness of his illness, man, I was just really, really blown away, and have been covering him in prayer and sending him notes of encouragement and things like that. Dwayne Charleston is a person who loves life, loves the community, loves people. Dwayne has always been kind of the Energizer bunny. I mean, he just keeps going and going and going. He's never met a cause that he didn't enjoy being a part of, from Prairie View and active in the political community there, to sending goats to families in Africa. I mean, you name it. Dwayne Charleston has been involved in it. And to hear, Dwayne, that you had contracted prostate cancer just really took me back. You're part of this documentary. Talk a little bit about your journey in terms of, how this got started in the first place and where you are now. And again, for those of you just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I want to let you know that we're dealing with a mature subject matter regarding prostate cancer, and I really want our guests to be able to talk freely, because today we want to save lives. Dwayne, tell us your story.
Hey, thank you, Pastor Cofield. My father was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2000, the year 2000, 13 years ago, and I didn't even come for his surgery. I was living in Austin. He had a surgery in Houston, and I thought that everything would be fine. My brother was a doctor and everything, and so 9 years passed, and we never even talked about it. He never talked about it. I knew he had radiation therapy, and he had an open surgery, radiation therapy and an open prostatectomy surgery, and we didn't talk much about it. And I went on about my way, bad diet, hadn't gone to the doctor in 10 years. In 2009, hadn't seen a doctor since 1999.
But you hadn't been sick or anything,
Hadn't
right?
been sick, never been sick. Never spent the night in the hospital, never spent more than 2 or 3 days. And everything was fine. And I had a life moment where I had a problem with my job, and I was stressed out, and then I was relieved of my employment. And life goes on, but I was relieved of my employment, and I was somewhat stressed. And my father was going through diabetes and had a stroke, and he was in a little bad health, and so I was able to carry him around and work with him. So I took him to one of his doctor's appointments, checking on him. And while I was sitting there, I called a friend of mine, and my friend said, "Man, why don't you go ahead and get you a checkup? Man, you need to worry about yourself." And so I decided to go in and set having taken my father, I went up to the counter and told the lady I want to go ahead and get a health checkup. I hadn't seen a doctor in 10 years. And so a few days later, I went back, and sure enough, I just told him to check my PSA, and I saw several messages on my voicemail. I listened to it, and the lady left a message. She said, "We really need to get you to come back in here right away. We've been trying to reach you for 2 or 3 days." And I kind of knew that was bad. But anyway, I called her, and she told me that I had my PSA had come back as an 86. And I knew nothing about a PSA. I didn't know anything about scores. But it was an 86. But at first, as soon as I found out it was 86, I started Googling. And when I began to Google, I saw that 0 to 4 was somewhat normal. 4 to 10 was dangerous. And I had an 86.
You were diagnosed at 86.
Exactly.
So between the stages, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, where were you diagnosed at that point?
Well, once they did the biopsy, it would be considered either a 3 or 4. They didn't know until they got in and did the surgery, and they found out that I had positive lymph nodes. And in some scales, that's considered 4 because they knew that it had spread. It was definitely a 3, possibly 4. They did the surgery. We did an open surgery, found out that it was positive lymph nodes. They extracted the one that they found that was positive. And a month after the surgery, they took me off of all the Lupron, the testosterone type of hormone therapy, and it came right back. The tumor started growing again. So they knew that the surgery didn't get it. So then they immediately said, well, let's get you right into radiation therapy. And they got me right into radiation therapy. And then a month after radiation therapy, the tumor started growing again. So they knew that it had spread beyond the pelvic region. But by that time, I had done a lot of damage to my body. But I think it was good damage in the sense that they extracted a lot of the tumor wherever the cells were. And so it has been growing now for 3.5 years. And I go on and off of treatment. And they've been controlling it quite well for right now.
Okay, so you get the word, an 86. That's off the scale. I mean, when you found out that was your score in terms of your PSA, and you had done your homework and you found out how serious it was, what was your first thought?
Well, my son.
I mean,
was,
because you had no symptoms.
That's right. That's right.
So I mean, so you were 46. You had no symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Hadn't been ill.
Mm-hmm.
You just get a test because you took your dad, and you get this high PSA. I mean, you had to think it was a mistake or something.
Well, the first thing I thought about, and you don't think about, the digital rectal exam. You don't think about your sexual future, anything like that. My first thing I thought about was, will I see my son graduate from high school? He was in 8th grade at the time. And then I was going through some criminal prosecution on some stuff that was job related. So then I was also wondering, well, if I go to trial, and if I get convicted, would I die in prison? Would I see my son finish college? I mean, a lot of stuff was running through my head, but it was primarily whether or not I would see my son graduate from high school. And because I had done the studies, and it said, it was 6 or 7 years, maybe 10 years if it was really good, if I did well. And so I was very concerned about that. And then the doctor came in. I was at MD Anderson, and the doctor came in, and when he was coming to tell my wife and I what the results of the biopsy were, he came in walking with his head down. And, because you're looking for everything. This is 86. What is he going to say? And when he walked in, I'll never forget, his head was down. And I knew then my wife was asleep at the time, because it was about an hour we were sitting there, and she had fallen asleep. And he walked in and he said, Mr. Charleston, your cancer has already spread. He said, and I can't heal you, and no one at this hospital, I can't cure you, and no one at this hospital can cure you, but we can treat you. He said, but the good news is that God is still in the healing business. And that doctor, and I won't mention him by name, but he did get down on his knees and he prayed for my wife and I at the time, and so things have gone fairly well for me. But it's very terrifying. It's terrifying, and I have never ever been one to have thought that I would be diagnosed with cancer. No, not me. And in fact, it was one of the producer's brothers. I was eating my regular bad diet at a fried chicken establishment when I ran into the producer's brother, and we began to talk about his brother. And I just told him, I said, yeah, man, I'm been going through right now, and I've been diagnosed with prostate cancer, and just happened to tell his brother, and I guess his brother conveyed it to him, and I got a call several months later. But with total fear, never had a single symptom, wasn't getting up in the middle of the night, had no erectile dysfunction, nothing, absolutely nothing, and it had already spread.
Wow. I think one of the key pieces about your journey that I think every man needs to take to heart is a lot of times we think on such a shallow level, and I say a shallow level, and I certainly don't want to be offensive to anybody when I say that, but before you're diagnosed, you think about your sexual prowess or the lack thereof. Am I still going to be able, to get my swerve on? Am I still going to be able to do those things? But you said when you were diagnosed, man, that wasn't what you were thinking about. I mean, you were thinking about family. Mm-hmm. You were thinking about your future, spending time with your family, your children, and all of those things. You've been now in treatment for 3 years?
Just almost 4.
Almost 4 years. How are you doing now? Do you have symptoms now? I mean, or are you still?
No symptoms from the prostate cancer. But because I have a tumor somewhere, or they believe that there's a tumor somewhere, they have me on what they call androgen deprivation therapy, which suppresses your testosterone to as low as they can get it, essentially having the testosterone level of a 2 or 3 year old. I guess in the Bible they will call that a eunuch or something, because you're chemically castrated. And so you get side effects of hot flashes. I still get quite a few hot flashes, easily weight gain. So if you already have a bad diet and you're predisposed to gaining weight, it just increases the opportunity because you have no testosterone. It's very difficult to work out, and they're even telling you to work out. Make sure you continue to work out, and it's difficult to work out because you get extremely tired and fatigued. And then because of the extreme nature of the surgery, because the cancer had spread from the prostate, it had already left the prostate, they had to cut out areas all around the prostate, which included the erectile nerves. And so in my particular case, they cut all the erectile nerves, which I knew then that would render me completely impotent. And we chose to have a nerve transplant. We did cadaver nerve transplant, and that didn't take after a year, and we waited a year. So I found myself completely impotent. Viagra didn't work, Cialis didn't work, nothing worked. And that would only have helped give me an erection. But then when you're on the androgen deprivation therapy and there's no testosterone, then you have no sex drive. You're essentially castrated. So you, not only, even if you had sex drive, you couldn't get an erection because the nerves had been cut. And so that was devastating. And in the process, this whole thing I'm going through, I'm fighting cancer. I'm fighting for my life and my job. I'm going through a difficult marriage and eventually a divorce. And so those things became important, but they weren't nearly as important as fighting cancer. But it is very difficult. And, I saw the other day, I had made up my mind that I was going to speak about, this is my very first time speaking publicly other than the documentary, but I made up my mind that I was going to speak honestly and openly about what I've been going through. And then I saw Angelina Jolie, I think, who had a
double
mastectomy.
Yep.
And I got to thinking, wow. Everybody's talking about how courageous she is, and absolutely she was to take that move, that preemptive move. She was not being selfish. Even with all her beauty, she was not being selfish. I had been selfish for so long for not going to the doctor, and now my children were faced with the prospect of living without me. And so I decided I was going to speak openly about everything. And so when the impotence came and the hot flashes and the lack of desire, I knew there was one thing that I did have to do, and that was essentially a penile transplant. Just like you have breast, transplants and mastectomies. Well, when it's gone that far and it's spread that far, you literally, if you want to continue to have a sexual life, and I was only 46 when I was diagnosed, 49 now, I'll be 50 in a few days, but I had to have a penile implant where they completely take I'm not sure of the medical term, but they take the insides of your penis and completely take it out, and they put implants in your penis, and then there's a pump that is put in your scrotum and a reservoir for fluid in your abdomen. You pump the pump in your scrotum, and you can pump yourself up into having an erection. And so you literally have a transplant, and so it's a very difficult situation. but it does preserve a matter of sexual function. As long as I'm now not on the testosterone depleting drug, then I can get the sexual urge, and I can feel whole again. But it's been very difficult, and then of course when they cut all the erectile nerves, that also cause a great deal of incontinence. And so I'm finding myself I've been wearing pads for 2 years, and I'm having a surgery in 2 weeks to deal with that issue, where they'll be putting a sling in my pubic bones. And so all of the problems I've had have stemmed from the original surgery, but that original surgery saved my life and gave me a second chance.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. Dwayne, I want to thank you for your transparency. I want to thank you for your vulnerability, for sharing with us. What would you say to a man who is sitting out there listening right now, or a lady who has a man in her life? She doesn't know if he's been tested, or maybe he hasn't gotten tested. What would you say to him?
Well, first of all, I'd say, if you get on the internet enough, or there's some for-profit businesses that do blood tests, you can get a PSA for $50, even if you don't have any insurance. And if you don't have any insurance and you are tested positive, you'll be taken care of. You'll be okay. But get tested ASAP, soon, because if you can catch it at stage 1 before it leaves the prostate, like Dr. Hall said, there's a 95% or better chance that you can be cured of it and it won't come back. But if you wait, it will only get worse, and you cannot be selfish as I was, as so many other men have been, and to think these, I guess you could call it homophobic thoughts of this digital rectal exam, but it is something that you can overcome. It's something that you can beat, and it's something that you could survive. I would not wish the treatments that I've had on anybody, and the only way that you can really prevent that is to go get tested. Get your PSA. It's a simple blood draw, and you don't even have to have the digital rectal exam done right away. But if that PSA comes back elevated, I would highly advise you to go forward with other tests that can confirm. And then you have to also, there are more advanced tests now that will tell whether or not it's an aggressive form or slow growing form that will never cause you death anyway. But you got to get tested. Absolutely incredible.
You know, a lot of times we ignore things, and we think ignoring things makes them go away. And when we ignore things, they only get worse. Dr. Hall, I do want you to address one issue for our listening audience, because I know there's some men thinking, see that brother going through all that stuff? Man, that's why I don't want to get tested. Not getting tested only makes it worse. But when we talk about sexual activity, when we talk about your testosterone levels and things like that, can that be salvaged if it is diagnosed early and treated early, or is that something that automatically happens?
No, once again, the earlier, the better. And that's going to be a theme that needs to be impressed and imposed within the mindsets of the brothers that are listening out there via these airwaves. What you do now could benefit you a long way down the road, but it requires you to be proactive about your health and take that matter within your hands and see it as an important matter. If you don't deem it as being important, no one else really will.
Yeah.
Let me say something else too that I see on the news all the time. There are a lot of people, not on the news, but in television, radio. There are a lot of these drugs that people are taking right now that give them more testosterone. So as men get older and their testosterone levels drop, many of them are just concerned about, why am I not having this urge, and why is my sex life slowed down so much? Then they go get these testosterone supplements, and that's like putting gasoline on a fire for a man who has prostate cancer and it has not been diagnosed in him. So if you're going to get testosterone supplements, you must go get a PSA before you take those testosterone supplements. You have to.
Listen, let me also say this to our listening audience. There are free tests available. If you live in Houston, you can go to MD Anderson. You can request a free screening. If you do not have insurance, if you do not have Medicare or Medicaid, and you're listening, you can get a free test. Tests are done every Tuesday morning at 7:30 a.m. You can call the urology department at 713-792-3250. You can follow me on Twitter. Go on my Facebook page. This number will be posted, 713-792-3250. Call the urology department at MD Anderson. you can get a free screening on Tuesday. I talked to a representative there, and they said, listen, if you don't have insurance, you don't have Medicare, you don't have Medicaid, you can get a free test. And if you are diagnosed with prostate cancer, you can and will be treated. September is Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. A lot of institutions, medical institutions, provide free screening in September. But listen, brothers, don't wait. If you can afford to get tested now. You can go to any clinic and get a prostate screening done. The earlier you know, the better. And remember, it's better to know. Landy, let me ask you just to share some final thoughts with our listening audience.
Well, really quick, I just wanted to have Dr. Hall explain exactly the function of the prostate and where it's located, because we found a lot of people didn't even know that when we would ask, when we did street interviews on the street, people didn't know what the function of the prostate is. So I was hoping Dr. Hall could share that with the listening audience.
Quick anatomy lesson for you. The prostate gland itself is located just beneath the bladder, but in between the bladder and the rectum. And this is why, once again, I emphasize that having the actual rectal exam is it cannot be avoided in this particular case based on location of the gland itself. So.
And what is the function of the gland, doctor?
Actually, the prostate functions for part of semen production for us, but also it actually acts as a control tract for our urinary tract, also just as well. The bladder is more or less just a pouch, but the urinary line actually travels through the prostate itself and works. If you could see and visualize things visualize it as more of a valve, then that gives you a good idea of its operation.
You know, it's interesting. Years ago, I don't even remember where I saw it, but I remember hearing them saying, you know, one of the things to exercise the prostate and to keep it strong was in the midst of a urine flow to stop your urine. And do that periodically, and that would help your prostate. Is that, did I hear that correctly?
Actually, that is a very good exercise. Consider this: your prostate gland is only the size of a walnut. But yet it packs a whole lot of potential. And so that is one good practice that can be utilized. It's something that we tend to lose hold of later on in years in life, but it is. I think that's a very good exercise to utilize.
Chris?
Yeah, we just wanted to say our executive producer, John Bell, who's a local here, we just wanted to, and Landy and I wanted to really sincerely give our appreciation to Pastor Cofield, as well as the Good Hope members, for allowing us to come in and share our dream, our documentary, and really to help spread the word as you spread the gospel. So we really want to reach out to you and say thank you so much to you and your members.
Yes, thank you very much.
You know what the late Vernon John said, whenever you see a good fight, get in it. And I've added, if you don't see a good fight, start one. And this is not a good fight. This is a great fight. I want to encourage you to go to their website, The Silent Killer Doc, The Silent Killer DOC, and check them out. Check out the video links. They're working on this documentary. You can give towards this project and help bring it to completion. And I want to encourage you to check it out, The Silent Killer documentary. It is going to change many lives. Thank you all for sharing with us on tonight. You've been listening to Real World, Real Talk, and I don't know if we've had a show any realer than we've had tonight. Prostate cancer affects African American men at twice the rate it affects other men. African American men are almost twice as likely to die of a diagnosis than other men. It hits us hard, and when it hits us in a very, very strong way. The way for you to combat this is by early detection, getting tested. Brothers, don't live a selfish life. Don't live a life marked by fear. Take advantage of the medical advances out there. Don't sit passively by. Be proactive when it comes to your own health. You have to step up. And just like we looked at the medical community over the last month to find a truck, one of the things that I want to encourage my listeners to do, if you work in the medical community, let's start making some noise. because we've got to get brothers tested. We have to make it available. Contact the Silent Killer documentary staff at info@thesilentkillerdoc.com. You can also call 317-840-4897. That's 317-840-4897. I want to thank my panel today, my guests, for making this a really, really special show. We're going to be praying for each one of our guests. Dr. Hall, for the work that he's doing, the tremendous research that he's doing, for the executive producer, the director producer of the Silent Killer documentary, for my friend Dwayne Charleston, who's in the fight for his life, but always has such a great, great spirit. And man, we are so encouraged and grateful for you coming on and sharing with us today. Whatever you do in the life that you live, keep it real, make it real. Take advantage of every opportunity that you have to be the best person that you can be. And let's make sure we do our part to fight the silent killer. Until next week, God bless.
The views or opinions expressed on the preceding program do not necessarily represent the views or opinions of the management and staff of KTSU.